Hey guys, it's SD, your host of the Life Fix Relationship podcast, where people with all sorts of backgrounds, challenges, and life experience show us how they make their relationship extraordinary.
Hey guys, hope you're having an awesome day. Whatever is, whatever was, whatever will be, just make it awesome. Now, are you looking to make your relationship awesome? If you answered yes, then you want to go right now to geniusrelationships.com and start taking your relationship to the next level with the help of multiple relationships experts. I'll see you there. Now, for today's episode, we've got a mom of four, including triplets. No wonder why she wrote a book, Secrets to Parenting Without Giving a Fuck. Go find out more about her, what she does, and how it could go and improve your relationship with your kids and with your partner at AskMomParenting.com. Thank you so much, Sue, for being here. I'm super excited to be speaking with you. You want to start by telling us how your career in parenting started?
Well, I never really wanted to be a parent. Not a big fan of kids, interestingly. So, when I was younger, I never really wanted kids. And, I met a guy who wanted kids. And after we were married for a few years, I decided, okay, we'll have a kid. I'll do this. This is a nice thing. I'm going to do this for you. We had our first
Do this
baby.
for you. Have a kid is like completely life-changing. It's not like, okay, we'll buy this car. It's having a kid.
Yeah. Well, he loves kids. And, I was kind of apathetic, like, I've got my own business. We're married. He's my soulmate. He's an awesome guy. So all right, I'll have a kid for you. And, I'm being tongue in cheek. I was ready, but
Yeah.
I was blaming him,
Makes it easier to take.
And then after we had our first baby, a couple of years in, we're just tripping over ourselves with this one kid. We're picking up his muffin. We're tripping over ourselves, making sure that we're accommodating all this kid's needs. And finally, I just looked at my husband and said, let's just have our second baby. We need to kind of move on and not be the focus of this kid's attention, because.
So now you're the one that wanted the kid.
So now I said, okay, we had one, let's have two. Anyway, I ended up with, dropping two eggs and splitting one and ending up with triplets naturally. So I went from 1 to 4 kids overnight, and all when I was not even wanting, I never really envisioned myself being a parent. I wasn't that woman, when I was younger going, oh, I can't wait to be a mom. I love to babysit for money. I just never identified myself as being a parent. So I had a lot to learn. And that was kind of my foray into growing up and being less egocentric and less selfish. And it was, looking back, hindsight's 2020. Looking back, I see that this was the journey I was meant to be on, is being a parent. And I was meant to raise 4 kids. How
old are they now, your kids?
We have a 23-year-old, our oldest, and then the triplets are 19.
Oh, wow.
So I look back now and I can laugh about it, because it's what I really needed. It was the journey I was meant to be on. And sometimes the things that we don't see as a gift, which I really didn't in the beginning, I couldn't tell anybody I was pregnant with triplets without crying. And I didn't know that sounds ungrateful, but that's just where I was at that time, in that headspace of just, this is so
very
overwhelming.
understandable.
So overwhelming. My life is just going to go from 1 to, I need a bigger car. Or, how am I going to pay for 4 college tuitions? It just was so overwhelming. And the business that I built for myself was something, it was a real big piece of me that I felt so satisfied with. It was just so fulfilling. And I remember laying on the table when the technician told me there were 3 babies in there. And, were you on fertility? No. Well, there's 3 babies in there. I remember laying on the table thinking, I am not going to get rid of my business. I'm going to find a way. I just remember feeling resolved that I'm going to make this work. And, and I have, and I feel really proud that I am a mom, but I'm also an entrepreneur. And I think it's important that as moms, there's so many mompreneurs out there, and so many of us balancing that little piece of us, and also giving to our children and to our husbands and to ourselves, just for self-care. And I look back and I'm like, wow, I did it. It's been an interesting journey, but it's been fun.
What did your husband think when he found that
He
you were
was
pregnant?
ecstatic. Well, he saw me upset. When we first started dating, one of the first things I told him was, he comes from a bigger family and I just have an older brother. And one of the first things I told him was like, I don't like kids. So just know that. And he said that he goes, yeah, I heard you, but I knew you weren't serious. Like I knew you didn't really mean it. He knew me better than I knew myself, but he was ecstatic. He knew how overwhelming it felt for me, even though the best husband you could ever have, which I do have an amazing husband and the most helpful, even though no matter how awesome the guy is, and I really have to say he's the best, we still bear the brunt as moms. And, for a little while, I was a little bitter about that. Like, yes, I work from home and he's in the military. So, he was deployed a lot and so forth. But when the kids are sick, who do they call? I balanced the full time business and I balanced running the home. It's two full time jobs. No matter how you slice it, no matter how awesome the husband is, it's still two full time jobs. And therefore, just even having him deployed, getting a tiny taste of single parenthood, my hat's off to these people, moms or dads, whoever are at home with kids while they're balancing work. It's just probably the most difficult struggle anybody could have. It's truly hard. So, but no, he was excited and supportive and well, after I got pregnant with what I thought to be my second baby, I said, we're done. And he was already negotiating for a third. And I said, the only hope you have for a third is that if this is another boy, you might be able to convince me to get pregnant again. So he jokes that, we both win. I got to only be pregnant twice and he got to have 4 kids.
Pregnant twice with 3 being 1.
I know. I remember walking around huge going, I am 4 people. Everywhere I go, I am 4 people. I'm over half the size of our family wherever I'm going. Oh,
Crazy.
yeah. Yeah.
Now,
It's
how
been
did that
interesting.
affect at that point? He was so excited and you were extremely overwhelmed. How did that affect your relationship then?
It didn't affect us. It didn't affect us in a negative way in any, it gave him a chance to be as supportive as he is and to be as excited as he is. And he has a tremendous respect for me and just gave me the space I needed. I'm a real, I'm a realist. I'll dive into the feelings that I have in the moment. And I allowed myself, I like consciously allowed myself. I don't want to say the word depression because that minimizes people who really go through that. But I went through some time where I'm like, what am I going to do? I felt claustrophobic. I have 4 babies. This is so, I can't grasp what's happening. I allowed myself feeling that way for about a week. And then I snapped out of it and I said, okay, I started the work. I did the research. I joined a few mother of multiples groups. I started reading, I started understanding a little bit more about the dynamic. And actually, I felt most sad for my oldest because I thought he's going to be buried in all of this. Like he went from all this attention to how are we going to incorporate him I just all the things that entered my mind of, all the things that I knew I had in store to try to make this work.
How did that
Um,
end up working out with your oldest?
well, I mean, amazing. And it got better every year. I mean, in the beginning, it's interesting because with twins or triplets, anytime you have a multiple situation, the bond there is so strong. And the dynamic. So in our particular case, we had identical boys and then we had the girl. So we had the identical bond where they're mirror twins and they are on that wavelength. Then they have the sister who is on the wavelength with them, but so there's a dynamic within the triplets. Then there's the dynamic between the older one, and he wasn't able to be the typical bossy big brother. Like, big brothers, tend to be bossy or controlling or, make fun of them. He got shut out. So if he was ever a typical big brother in any way, they just kind of shut him out early on and they had each other. They always had each other. So I did have to do a lot of work behind the scenes to try to incorporate and teach them Matt needs to be included, or, Matt, you can't talk to them like that because they're all going to stick together. And if you say something mean to your sister, the other two are going to come in and, they're going to circle the wagons. And so it was an interesting dynamic for me to go from 1 to 4 and then have all those interrelationships going on.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
made it fun. It made it interesting. But we all talk about how having a bigger family is just, he's like, gosh, if we just had the other one and none of the other two, how boring would this be? So it's worked out great for everybody. But it
What's
was
been the
tough.
craziest story you had having them as triplets?
Well, let's see, triplets in like a triplet story. I don't know, because a lot of the stories tended to happen with all 4. But we do have
But
fun
because of
stories.
the triplets, anything, just because of, if you don't have anything, skip it, go on to next. I have so many things in my brain waiting to ask
I
you.
know. No, well, we have funny stories of where the boys, enduring jobs, would get a job, and one of them had to be at soccer practice and couldn't miss his job, or he'd get fired, and so his brother pitched in for him, and nobody knew. We have some fun stories like that. I have some fun stories, some funny, very funny stories, but they're really probably more brother, sister, sibling stories as opposed to just triplets. But in the book, in a book that I'm about to launch, I do have a story about how with the 3, everywhere we went, we'd have the carriers, and Matt was probably about 3.5, and we'd have the babies and the carriers. And the strangers would just come up to us and put their faces into the carrier and say, are these triplets? I've never seen triplets. And just this, I don't know, a familiarity that people would think that they had in our situation, just how unique it was. And then they would talk about, oh, these are so cute, and all these wonderful things about the babies. And Matt was over there by himself, being completely neglected and left out, and not the people would just come up and not realize that he was just standing there awkward, wondering why these kids were getting, 4-year-old can't process, why are they getting so much attention? So I have this thing in the book that I came up with called programming, and I came upon it, I guess, just by accident during that situation, where I then would just, expect that these people would go to a restaurant, people were going to come up and talk about the babies, and I'd say, and they have the best big brother ever, and I would just make the sweeping gesture to give Matt some attention. And I found that he really puffed up with pride, and I thought, gosh, is it really this easy to program my kid to be the best big brother ever? So it became a thing to where I put that as a chapter in my book, that we can program our kids to help sort of reframe, their thought process or how they're feeling about themselves, or sort of redirect an inner narrative that they may be thinking, that we as parents can come up and say, you're the best leader. Did you see how you did that with your friends? Or so I call it programming, but it was because of that situation with the triplets that I kind of stumbled upon that as a successful technique.
Yeah, it's
To
literally like reframing the situation, and the kid sees it one way, and all of a sudden you go and say something else. So now they go and put different meaning to it. Now,
Yeah.
do you think that would work also with adults?
With what?
With adults, like with your
100%.
husband or something?
Oh gosh. In fact, I put, I mentioned in there about how, yes, it does. I have another chapter about partnership, but the same philosophy applies here, is that when you use words like we, or, you're going to program, but you can, 100%, you can tell your spouse, your partner, you can say things like, how that saying is, catch them when they do something right. So instead of finding the negative or complaining about something, finding that spark of, where they helped out with the dishes or the vacuum, or, whatever, they find out when they're saying the right things, and just exploit that, program more of that. And yes, it works. It works with everybody. So, yeah.
Yeah, we all go much better for positive energy instead of negative.
Yeah.
Literally rebuilding us. Yeah.
It's just a tactic to use to make sure, that we're reinforcing behavior and words and things that people are doing that are good and productive, that we can reinforce more of that. People like feedback. That's one of the most important things that people can get, is just your feedback. And if it's good feedback, all the better.
For sure. Now, how did you get specifically into parenting?
Well, into parenting. So again, taking with us the fact that I didn't want kids and that I ended up with 4, and having my own business. I'm a type A person, so I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm very type A, and grew up in the 60s and 70s, born in the 60s, back when parents said do it because I said, children were seen and not heard. And so I felt like, well, that's what I do. I just tell them, this is what I need you to do. Well, that it doesn't work that way. And my oldest is has the traits that will make him success, or are making him successful today, but make him difficult to parent as a young child. So he's very confident, very curious, very, well, why, and I'm busy, I'm stressed, I'm tired, I don't have time for why, just do it because I said. Well, that didn't work, obviously. And I had a big journey to go on for myself as to how to reach children, how to use the psychology to get to their level and understand what motivates them. So here I am with my ego. I'm all about, do it because I said, I'm busy, I'm working. Nobody cares. When you become a mom, nobody cares. They're kids and they don't really know. So when my husband got deployed, he was gone, I think on that particular trip, 6 months, and he was in combat at the time. So I had 4 kids under 4. We had just moved to Boise, Idaho. I had no friends or family, and I was just drowning. And my oldest was just towing the line, like just holding me accountable for every little thing I said and did. And, we were getting some bad behavior. So at that time, we had him in a Montessori preschool, and they offered a parenting class. So I thought, okay, well, I'm doing all right. All I'm doing is yelling, but I'm doing okay. I had my ego just locked and loaded, like, husband gone, 4 kids under 4 in a business. I'm fine.
How are you doing it? I don't know.
I'm just yelling a lot. That's all I'm doing. So I went into the parenting class, and she asked everybody to discuss what they were there to learn. And I just said, well, I'm just here to learn how to stop yelling because, I've got a lot on my plate. I'm justified. I have all these things going on. And she just looked at me and said, well, is it working? And I realized in that moment, it was a turning point for me, because I realized, no, it wasn't working. And I couldn't use all of these other reasons to validate yelling at my kids. I had to learn new methods and new ways of approaching and reaching my kids. I had no tools. I had nothing. I had certain innate abilities. I knew enough to go seek some guidance, and I knew enough that I had some work to do on myself. But that class and her 3 question, is it working, really was a turning point for me, because I was then able to go, wow, it's not working, and what I'm doing isn't working. So what does work? And that's really how I got into the parenting, because, and, when we talk about, relationships, the most important relationship that we have is the one with ourselves. And in the book that I wrote, and when I look back now, parenting is in my rearview mirror. So I just got done with raising 4 teenagers, and, I have so much to offer and help parents. I just got through all of this. And the first...
Probably still deal with it sometimes.
Oh, I'm still dealing with it, but a lot of the early stuff in the formative years and the foundation is laid. And that was the turning point for me. So having 1-year-olds and a 4-year-old who was a worthy adversary and with his confidence, took me to going, okay, how do I reach him? And I realized I have to change myself. I have to be willing to go, I'm yelling, it's not working, what will work? And that was really, now my ego was sort of set aside. And now I was ready to say, okay, I'm ready to learn. I'm in receive mode. So I just grew from there. And, I am a spiritual person. I look at all sides of situations. I am pretty in touch with myself. I'm, intuitive and those types of things. And being a parent really brought that out in me. It helped me. It just sort of kickstarted what I already had innately in me. But just that class and those words of, is it working, set aside the fact that I felt justified in yelling. we're never justified in yelling. We think we are. And I had every reason to be a yeller with all that I had on my plate. But yeah, at the end of the day, you got to go, do I want their behavior to change? Or do I want to just keep justifying why I should be yelling?
Yeah, victim mode.
So,
So putting that ego aside, obviously, not just with your parenting, affected everything else in your life because you're changing as a person.
mhm.
What effect did it have on your work, on your marriage, on everything else you were doing?
Oh, so much. It had a huge effect because now you're not taking ideas and judgments and things that you have, which are faulty. I mean, when we're young, we're so selfish, and having kids and parenting just kickstarted my journey toward evolving as a person, as who I was meant to be. And I saw that in work. It I had several epiphanies along the way. Ego was the first thing, but one of the biggest things that I learned was letting go of control. And so that was one of the pivotal moments in my life that helped my relationships with my husband and my work people, my friends. Because again, being an entrepreneur and being type A, and I'm the mom, I got to make decisions, I'm busy. I have to be, I had this false sense that I had to be in control all the time. And once I let go of that and what first the ego had to go, then you come to this awareness and to this openness. You realize, okay, this control thing, I've got to let go of controlling people, of like controlling the kids. I have to find new ways to motivate them to do what I need them to do. And that's why in the book that I wrote, Letting Go of Control is chapter 2, because everything is written in a consecutive way that helped me realize and just kind of come into my own and to be the parent that I needed to be and that the kids needed me to be. So letting go of control, I would say, was pivotal in terms of changing my relationship with, or enhancing my relationship with my husband and my kids, because now I didn't have skin in the game all the time. I wasn't setting myself up for disappointment that if things didn't go my way, or why are we driving this way? We should be driving this way, or controlling certain things that I had no business caring about. And then that leads to showing people more respect.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that was just, so all of those things I write about, and all of those things. So in the first half of the book is all about your relationship with yourself. So how do you change yourself to get the response and to get the improvements from of the behavior that you want from other people? All you have is control over yourself, and how you reframe how you view things and what your expectations are. So to be the parent you really want to be and to get the behavior that you really want from your kids, it starts with you. And you have to just be open to, guilt and control and all of these things that we build up and that are part of who we are. Kids will expose your ego. They will expose everything if you're open to it. They'll, it's just been it's been an interesting journey to watch how I've evolved. And that came from a willingness on my part,
Sure.
just because I wanted good behavior from these kids. I mean, you can't get it if you're busy controlling everybody and you're yelling and punishing. Those things don't work.
Yeah. So what's one tip you would give to someone who wants to start letting go of control in life in general?
What's one tip?
Mm-hmm.
Well, awareness really is just that you've got to recognize that you're doing in that. And you've got to be able to see that it's really just a self-awareness, and just sitting with yourself and seeing the effect of your words, the effect of your actions. It's a situational awareness where you've got to be present in the moment and
Everything
recognize.
goes back to self-awareness. Yeah.
Yeah. It all comes back. And self-awareness and your own relationship with yourself is the number one thing for a relationship, any relationship. And, we all say that, until we kind of get our affairs in order, we can't have a good, you talk to our friends, oh, this relationship didn't work, or that guy didn't work out, because we weren't in a place of accepting a person that's actually productive or good for us. So it all starts with us. It all starts with our self-knowledge. And But before that is the willingness to see that we've got to make those changes for ourselves.
Yeah. I think it comes like the self-aware, like, hey, this is not working. Like you said, yelling isn't working, doing something else. The willingness that I know it's not working, but some people will pretend that it's not fine. It's too much work or just deny it, or the willingness, and then actually being able
Well, I
to.
see a lot of selfishness in this world. And with the kids as they were growing up, I got to see a lot of kids coming through the door, with 4 kids and all their friends. And I met a lot of parents. And sadly, I just see a ton of selfishness and decisions where people aren't putting others first. And if we get ourselves in order and we get to a comfort level with ourselves and we're working on ourselves, all the other stuff falls away. All the other stuff falls into place. And I just see that, especially as a parent, parents who weren't willing to invest in their kids to drive them here or to go do lessons or to whatever it is. Once you become a parent, it's never about you ever again, ever. It's even hard for me to sit talking about myself right now because I have trained myself to be an astute listener for the last 20 years. Moms, we're not used to talking about ourselves. And I think that some of these traits that if we can do the whole ego setting aside and the losing control, letting go of that and not owning guilt, not owning guilt means that we apologize for a mistake that we made and we pivot, we move on. We're not letting it be an anchor in our lives.
Dwell in it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's not productive for anybody. It's not productive for you. It's not productive for your kids, your husband, any relationship. So again, yes, it all comes to holding that mirror up and looking in the mirror and saying, what part of this do I own and where can I make the difference?
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So once a person has that relationship with themselves or however else you want to say it, I don't know if you call it your parenting method or your tools, like what do people do to go and really raise their kids in the best way possible?
Well, what it is it's a mindset. And so, the title of my book, which I probably can't say on air, Secrets to Parenting Without Giving an F, is a tongue-in-cheek thing. That's kind of my humor. There's humor throughout the book, but it's a state of mind. It's a mindset for successful parenting. And really what it is it's the delicate balance between knowing when to guide and knowing when to let go. And as parents, we really inflate ourselves into thinking we have a bigger, more important role than we do. And we need to have less of a role, believe it or not. A lot of the work and parenting that I did with the kids is behind the scenes. It's the little puppet strings in the back where it's not necessarily overt behavior. It's in the back, the supporting. It's the behind the scenes setting up processes and setting up systems and investing in them for sports and events and doing things that are unseen and unsung hero type stuff that you're doing that unselfishly to support your child. And so along the way, I realized that, when the kids are young, they really want you involved. And then eventually they just are like, you're so embarrassing.
Get out of
here. And they joke about helicopter parenting and, talk about the lawnmower parent who mows down every little problem in front. And I call it now morphine parents. They take all their kids' pain away. The mindset for parenting is really, it's a confident state of mind on our part in that we know that, we're respecting the child as an individual. They are their own soul. They have their own journey. And the way that we want to treat ourselves as being on our own journey, and we don't like other people to get in the way of that, we need to stay out of their way. And it's hard to realize when we're doing that on a day-to-day basis, because on the one hand, they really need us. And on the other hand, we have to go, you know what? That's for you to figure out.
Yes.
And that's why, I talk about punishment not working. We have to talk about logical consequences. We talk about how do we mirror society in the home? And to some people, it might look like, oh, that's so mean, or, well, why aren't you jumping in to help? Well, because that's disrespectful. That's disrespectful to the child because they can figure it out. So once I've let go
You
of
don't
control,
want them when they're 45 knocking on your door asking you for help also.
I've seen this so many times where parents make decisions selfishly, where they're not encouraging their kids to either go get jobs or to go out of state for college or to like keep them there, keep them home. It's all satisfying your need. And if you're working from an unselfish, less ego, less control, less guilt point of view, and this is the parenting mindset, when you get those things in order, you are then giving a lot more respect to your child. And that is where partnership parenting comes in. That's where respect and trust comes in. Your kids will trust you. If you're coming from a place of hidden agendas, and we have to be honest with ourselves. It's hard. It's really hard. But I have a saying that's, our children want to see their reflection. They don't want to see your projection. And we as parents, we do that and we think we're parenting correctly. We think we're doing the right thing by getting involved. And what did you do? What are your grades? And did you study for that test? And what did you get? And blah, blah. They don't, it's disrespectful to them. The underlying message is that I don't believe you can do it on your own.
Literally handicapping them.
You really are. But when you're in the moment and you're parenting, you're dealing with behavior from the child and parents don't understand. Why is he being so rebellious? It's because you're clamping down. It's because you are controlling and you're not respecting that child to give them the freedom to make their own decisions and to make mistakes without judgment. It's easy to talk about, but you really have to check in with yourself to make sure you're not doing it. One of the things that I'm most proud about as a parent is the relationships that we have with our kids, and that even through teenage years, and even with my daughter, all mothers and daughters, hate each other. My daughter's friends all hated their mom. We were the house where the kids came. My daughter and I go out to eat and see movies, every week. We have a great relationship. And I'm really, really proud of that. I worked hard for that, but it's the mindset. So that's where I talk about that in the book in terms of just letting go of where we think we need to get involved, because the less involvement, and we're involved, we're home, we're listening, we're there, but we're engaged, but we're not overtly coming in and telling them what they need to do and how they need to do it. So basically, if you look at your child's behavior and you're getting bad behavior, ask yourself, what can I do different? And that's what I really do with mentoring, is teach parents to see. Usually it's very quick. Sometimes if they're at a place where they're ready to learn something new and they're ready to say, okay, my child is the result of my parenting, right? So when a parent is at that point of readiness, like I was in that parenting class where she said, well, is it working? And I'm like, I guess not. I'm ready to learn. When a parent gets to that point and they really want behavior to change from their child, that's where I can step in and say, okay, here's what we do and here's how we do it. And it's actually counterintuitive. A lot of the things that I teach, parents go, why would I do that? Why would I grounded them? Why would they, I took their keys away. Why would I give them the keys back and unground them? And I say, well, because they're going to be adults in 2 years and it's not working. So here's what we do to make that work. So basically my whole thing about parenting is just the mindset that I've been able to create that I've seen has worked. And I like to help other parents.
You said before about logical consequences. You want to elaborate that a bit? What do you mean exactly?
There's two different types of consequences to behavior. There's a logical consequence where if if the child gets, if it's cold outside, you say, wear your coat, wear your coat, wear your coat. And the kid's always, disregarding what you say. Well, I'm going to tell you once, wear your coat. And then you're going to decide.
You wear a sweater when your mother's cold.
Yeah. So you finally just let go of that control and you go, okay, she'll see that it's cold out. I don't need to keep reminding these parents. We keep getting involved. Put your shoes on, put your shoes on. Logical consequences, we're leaving at 7. I said, put your shoes on. Your shoes aren't on. We're leaving. And, in my daughter's case, I kept reminding and it wasn't working. And finally, I just let it go and reminded her once. She didn't get them on. We left for school with no shoes and she missed the nature walk. she was devastated. I'm like, oh, well, logical consequence. I guess maybe next time you'll learn to, I never had to remind her to put her shoes on again because the logical consequence was that she realized,
Right. So it's not punishments. It's like just what's going to happen because of the fact that you don't put on your shoe. That's how they're going to learn. Exactly.
well, and what it is it's an awareness as a parent that this is a technique that we can use. And it's just backing up the behavior and going, okay, we know that every day I'm reminding her to put her shoes on. Today, I'm going to consciously just say it once, and then I'm going to act. At 7, we're leaving shoes on or not. And then so what we're doing in our home is we're mirroring society so that even at 5, our kids can have a logical consequence to their actions that builds and builds and builds so that by the time they get out, they're not that kid that's going, why am I not playing, on the team? Why am I getting fired from a job that I don't show up to? Why am I
It builds them as a person. They don't become victims. They know what's going to happen. They see cause and effect. And
they're not playing that victim card. And my goal was, I'm huge about accountability, like huge about owning your stuff and taking the truth and, incorporating that, taking constructive feedback. But then there's also like a pre-agree. There's another consequence where it's not as easy, where if you don't wear your coat, you get cold. There's another consequence where if you say you tell your child to ride their bike on the sidewalk and they're riding in the street, and now you say, well, you didn't listen. So what do most parents, you're grounded, time out, whatever it is that they're saying that you have to do. Instead, I just make the consequence, it's a related result consequence. So now this is a little bit harder for parents because it takes a lot of thought. If you're saying that the rule is to ride the bike on the sidewalk and they don't, then your consequence is a related result to the bike. So now they lose the opportunity to ride the bike. Now, here's the catch, though, and this is respectful parenting, and this is the mindset I'm talking about. I'm not going to be the one to tell you didn't ride on the sidewalk like I asked. Now you lose your bike until tomorrow. I don't do that. I say, what was the rule? I have to ride on the sidewalk. Okay, you're going to lose your privilege to ride your bike until you decide that you can ride on the sidewalk. Okay, now they're taking ownership of that decision. And I'm not telling them how long they have to wait because that's control. So these types of methods of working with kids and people, works for your relationships. It works for everybody. Hey, if your husband's not coming home on time, here's what I need. Here's the parameters with which I need them. And, in my case, if my husband was working too long or whatever, I'm like, well, I'm not going to wait for you for dinner while you work extra hours. You can't have both. You have to pick. So if I'm going to take the kids to the movie and you're working until past 6, you're missing the movie and you have to decide what's going to work for you. So it works.
Right. Not you're deciding for your husband. Your husband's deciding, does he want to work past 6 or is he wants to go?
So in the parenting scenario, I'm going to set the rule. The rule is you ride your bike on the sidewalk. And if you break the rule, you're not grounded. You're not losing your bike for a preconceived amount of time that I'm deciding, because kids want some control in their lives. And when you frame it that you can, you didn't ride on the sidewalk, you're losing your privilege to ride your bike until you are ready. And that works. And then if they keep riding in the street, which, honestly, when you treat your kids with respect and you allow them to have this little bit of control and power over their lives, you don't really have behavior issues. My kids they maybe tested me twice on something when I used these techniques. It never got worse than just 1 or 2 tests. It's just these techniques are counterintuitive because if you tell a parent, we've all grown up thinking we have to punish. We've all grown up thinking that you have to have a timeout, or you have to be punished, or you have to be restricted. Restriction just creates rebellion. And then the parent is wondering, well, why is my kid always fighting me? Because you're not giving them a tiny little bit of chance to have some control in their lives.
Yeah, you're not letting them just run their lives like they want to. And
Right, right. But even at 4 or 5, you can structure how you handle situations with your kids. You can structure it with
yeah, that's your job
these.
as a parent.
Yeah, I mean, as with a logical consequence or with a, related result consequence. But again, the related result one is one that I'm administering, but it has to be related to the offense. So for, say, teenagers, that's bust curfew.
Mhm.
Your curfew is 10 o'clock. And if they, and I technically, we always had our curfew a half hour before all their friends, just because that's when all the bad stuff happens, really, is like the last half hour to hour. Like, oh my God, you won't believe what happened when you left, the cops came or, whatever. But if I tell my kids come home at 10 and they almost never busted curfew, but they tested me, then they get busted. If they are late and they don't call me, like we're in an accident or something happens, then they get busted back to this ridiculously early time, 9 o'clock. And then they have to come home at 9 to prove that they're worthy of the later time. So again, that's a related result. So most parents that I see the kids will bust the curfew and the parent will say, you're grounded. Well, what does that do? But that's what we've been doing for years. Generation after generation has been about punishment and restriction and all of these methods that creates more rebellion from kids. And it doesn't have to be that way. So when we talk about parenting, I talk about that's the mindset that really does work.
Well, I love it. Now, what did your husband think of this mindset and how it was affecting your family dynamics?
He loved it. I'm the one that took the parenting class in the book and read a book with the class. And I'm the one that experimented with the techniques and he saw how they were working. But I was also the one that needed to do the most changing because my husband is patient, kind, like he's this one. Yeah. Nothing like me. He's got the patience of 10 men. I mean, he's funny and patient and wonderful. And I am type A, controlling, do it because I said. I'm Italian. I swear like a sailor. My humor is like, yes, I'm off the charts. So I'm the one that needed to change because I was home with them all day and I was the one getting the bad behavior. Now, that said, my husband also was the one that was sort of lecturing and nitpicking when they got to be teenagers. He was great with them when they were young. When I was really losing my temper with them, he was patient. As they got to be teenagers, I was able to use more of the strategic mindset with them.
You already trained. So
yeah. And he was more like restrictive and controlling. And he was starting to go down that path with our older son about, grades and that algebra grade. And, when your kids feel that the only control they have is to fail algebra to get you off their back. I know that sounds like that doesn't make sense, but it's true because if you're just constantly nabbing them, like, did you go in early? Did you get that figured out? They just want it to go away. So they're failing the class and, they're doing it to spite you because it's the only control they have. My older son tends to be a lot like me. And when my husband was just riding him, I saw my son's eyes just like glazing over, like, stop this. So I told my husband, stop. Leave him alone and see what happens. And wow, I mean, he started going in and figuring out the assignments. He started asking and getting more involved. He had more skin in the game for himself as to that grade. And he wasn't spending so much time fighting and dodging dad, who was just up in his grill about all the things that he needed to be doing. And so my husband did need some help in that regard, but for the most part, he fell in line with the techniques that I was using because he saw that they were working and he saw that I was yelling less because he was the one that was like, you're really yelling a lot. I'm like, well, do you have any idea what this is like at home? Like, this is, of course I'm yelling. If I don't yell, I'll hit. Like, pick your poison. I'm yelling and I'm swearing, if I can't do that, I'm going to have to start hitting, which we don't want that to happen.
Right.
So he was great. He was good, but that's what a good partner does, right?
Yeah.
When you have respect for each other. Yeah.
And you help each other, each do their own thing, be their own person.
Yes.
Control their lives. Exactly.
Well, my husband was happy too that I was changing, that he saw that I was working hard to make a difference and to be a better parent and to be a better mom, and that it was working and that the relationships were building and that the behavior was was going along great. And so that's what you do. You give each other that space to discover and to change and to grow. And then, then you program them for better. Like, oh, I see how you're not yelling. That
Literally. Yeah. Just like that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So for our very last question I
Yeah.
ask everyone, how do you describe an extraordinary relationship without using these 3 words? Love, connection, and respect.
Just being in tune enough with yourself to recognize when your soulmate comes into your life. I mean, you have to have your own stuff squared away. You got to be from a place of confidence, and you have to know what you're bringing to the table and what you expect someone else to bring to the table. You have to have those expectations. But when your soulmate walks into your life, be intuitive enough to recognize, and you can only do that by really knowing yourself.
I love that.
Yeah, that's how I would say.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sue. This was
Well, thank you,
amazing.
ST. This has been fun. I appreciate your having me on. Thank you very much.
Yes, I love chatting with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you enjoy that episode? Could you do me a personal favor and subscribe and leave a review? It would mean a lot to me. Thank you so much and have an awesome day.